I don't have synesthesia counts as an argument against acquaintance if sounds actually do have color features, and those features are apparent to those who have synesthesia. And so you could think that, no, it's just obvious that there's an awareness of the field, or that field is just not presented to me, um, uh, the color of the sound or the speckles of the hen. A large part of philosophy is just trying to analyze what it is that we believe and why do we believe it. Now, what makes it unique? I get that it's exhaustive. Well, one of the things that makes it unique is that no other book has all of these, arguments, or dealing with all these arguments in one place. But the responses that we offer, the objections, have not been in the literature before.
I think so. I mean, it's robust. This would be one that you might want to bring to a deserted island. No worries. I figured, this is getting so. You guys have charted so much territory. You're going to get arrested or something. You've charted so much new territory. It doesn't seem legal to do this with substance dualism.
So that would be whether or not the AI could know whether or not it's a thinking subject. The problem is that these, so take the the Turing test, or take the way that people are describing or testing whether or not large language models are conscious.
Welcome to Christian Philosophy Academy's podcast, Coffee with Philosophers. We both have our coffee going.
Mm.
There you go. So I hope you get a cup of coffee. Today we're talking about consciousness, substance dualism. Dr. Rickabaugh's book, The Substance of Consciousness, published with J.P. Moreland. It's an amazing, rich book. In fact, it's such a big book, and there's so much to it. I actually had to get the world's strongest coffee. So you might want to do that as well. Dr. Rickabaugh is an assistant professor of philosophy and research scholar of philosophy of technology and culture at Palm Beach Atlantic University in Florida. He works on consciousness and really just kind of sees what the implications are of a view of consciousness with regard to reality, the nature of human persons, unity and disunity of the human self, impact of technology as well on human flourishing, and how we can know and be transformed by God. He has a lot of publications, but let me go ahead and give you a heads up on one that's forthcoming. It is his book, What is Consciousness? It's a new introduction to the philosophy of mind that's forthcoming from InterVarsity Press. And it's really cool because, as it mentions in the blurb, there isn't a lot of work on consciousness done from a robustly informed Christian perspective. That's what he's up to in this book. So I definitely recommend keeping an eye out for that. Also, he's got a couple publications relevant to this talk here, which one is against emergent dualism. So he's defending substance dualism, but it looks like he's argued against emergent dualism. And that's in the Blackwell Companion to Substance Dualism. He also has another paper responding to N.T. Wright's rejection of the soul in the Haythrop Journal. So I recommend checking that out as well. So Dr. Brandon Rickabaugh, thank you for coming on Coffee with Philosophers.
Thanks for having me, Christopher.
And I always start out with the 5 books question. And as I've gone through this, I've noticed philosophers are good at loopholes. So I had to patch up a few little loopholes.
Yeah.
So what 5 single volume books would you bring to a deserted island? And then we'll just say, other than the Bible, if you knew you were going to be stuck there alone for 10 years.
Yeah. So the single volume one, that was hard. So the first one was Aristotle's Nicomachean Ethics. The second one I just had to cheat, I guess, which is the Acquaintance's Summa Theologia, but the Secundae. So if that counts as it's one volume of multiple volumes.
Yeah, that's a good workaround. That's totally acceptable.
Okay. And then Julian of Norwich's Revelations of Divine Love, Soren Kierkegaard's Works of Love, and then Husserl's Logical Investigations. It's hard to pick.
Wow.
It's hard to pick.
Yeah, those are great books. And in fact, we named one of our sons Soren after Soren Kierkegaard, and I love Works of Love. That is such a rich book.
Oh, yeah.
And our other son's named Augustine after St. Augustine. So
that was a
there
hard
you
one.
go.
I love Confessions. It was hard not to put that one on there either.
Right,
And
right.
then Husserl, Logical Investigations, made it on the list because I figured it'd take me 10 years to really understand what he's saying.
To figure out what Husserl's up to.
Yeah.
Well, today we're going to talk about his The Substance of Consciousness, his book with, as I mentioned, J.P. Moreland, and it's a comprehensive defense of contemporary substance dualism. I'll just mention one endorsement to give you a little bit of flavor. Robert Kuhn says the following, quote, "Rickabaugh and Moreland have written the most comprehensive, up-to-date, and sophisticated defense of substance dualism available today. They tackle quite successfully every anti-dualist argument in the literature, demonstrating the variety of options available to dualists and the fruitfulness of dualist framework for future research," which we're going to talk about today. And that's both scientific and philosophical. Especially impressive is their skill in drawing on Aristotelian, scholastic, and 19th century sources, such as Brentano and Husserl, which Dr. Rickabaugh just mentioned, to develop an attractive synthesis of dualism with hylomorphism. They bring to the philosophy of mind theoretical resources, including the metaphysics of mereology, that are badly needed in today's debate. End quote. Now, also, the dedication in the book is to both Swinburne and other substance dualists that have come before them. And they say to Richard Swinburne, whose meticulous reformulation and rigorous defense of substance dualism has inspired and challenged generations of philosophers to contend with the reality that we are body and soul. Now, in this discussion, I'm going to also throw in a few questions from you. So I put out to some of my friends on Facebook some questions. So I have one here from Alex Pinkney. He asked the following: is Brandon Rickabaugh's argument for substance dualism similar to Swinburne's argument for dualism?
Yeah. So Swinburne doesn't have one argument, and we don't have one argument. So kind of a hard question to answer. So one thing is Swinburne in his latest defense. Well, I guess not his latest. Body and Soul is his latest, but Minds, Brains, and Persons. No, Minds, Brains, and Free Will, I think it is. He has a treatment of the unity of consciousness. It's hard to tell whether or not he thinks it's really an argument or more of an intuition pump, but it seems to serve as at least like raising the probability of substance dualism. So on his terms, it's got to count as an argument in some way. And we have two chapters, one that deals with unity at a time, specifically phenomenal unity of consciousness at a time, and then another chapter that deals with the unity of the person over time. So I think that the Swinburne's is at a time. So one thing is we've got one chapter that has to do with unity of the subject of consciousness over time. And then the chapter on the unity of the subject at a time, what's different is we go into great deal to specify the metaphysical, ontological details that I think make the argument as strong as we can make it, I think. And the Swinburne doesn't fill out those details. And to be fair, too, he wasn't developing a whole chapter on this. And I'm writing a book right now that's just devoted to that. So there's a lot of detail to be worked out. So I want to say, one is we've got much more detail there. And two, I want to say the chapter on unity at a time focuses on phenomenal consciousness. And Swinburne's focuses on consciousness in general. The other, I guess, relatedly is Bill Hasker has worked on a version of the unity of consciousness argument, but his is at the level of the phenomenal field, sort of the unity of the experience that you're having, and we put it at the level of phenomenal consciousness there, but focus on the unity of the subject, and give lots of phenomenological and metaphysical details about both the field and the subject. So I guess one way to put it is we just give more detailed work on the metaphysical, ontological, and phenomenological aspects of those arguments in general, and focus on the subject of consciousness, if that's helpful. But there's, Swinburne's got so many arguments. Ours develop. I'll say this: one thing that's unique is that along the way we develop positive accounts of things like intentionality, or what a subject is, or what free will is. What do we mean by unity? What kinds of unity are there? And so we take it that we're furthering the debate in terms of specifying, and making, and in virtue of that, making various arguments stronger. There are some arguments that I think are pretty much new, but others are I think strengthened and more precise versions of pre-existing arguments. That's
great. Thank you for explaining that. And so it does sound like you're, in a way, charting new territory, pushing out in directions across time, and in terms of the phenomenal aspects that Swinburne didn't maybe develop as much, or that wasn't his project or purpose. As you mentioned, he was developing that general theory of consciousness. Mm-hmm. So that's exciting. And I'm just curious how this sort of collaboration with J.P. Moreland came about. So how did you guys sort of connect on this particular issue? And what was just a little bit of the way that the book was written and developed?
Yeah. So J.P. and our relationship's gone back pretty far. I went, I studied with him for my master's, and even a little bit before that, we went to church together and were part of a home group. And so we've got a long relationship, and have kept, kept in touch for a long time. I mean, he's a very close friend. I think we consider each other sort of part of each other's family. His wife and my wife, and my son Sawyer, his middle name is James, after JP. So we're very, very close.
Okay.
My dissertation was on the unity of consciousness. The dissertation wasn't a defense of substance dualism. I just tried to partition the logical space between views of the subject that has no parts and those that do, and then focused on problems for the views where subjects have parts. And so a bit of, a decent amount of the dissertation shows up in the book. And I think that it was just working through my dissertation, talking with JP, and just our mutual sort of like interests. And then the views that we've developed in other places complement each other very, very well. And so he said, hey, I want to work on this book. I think it might be like it's probably going to be my last and hopefully my best contribution to the, academic community. And he just invited me to do it, which was, amazing. And the way we went about it was just sort of brainstorming. What do we think are the most significant or most important aspects of arguments for substance dualism that would also be relevant to the conversations that are going on in the philosophy of mind, and that we could also, really speak competently on. And so we went through that brainstorming process, picked different chapters to write. And then I want to say we spent maybe a year and a half research and writing those. And initially we sort of just split it in half, but then I ended up coming up with 2 more chapters that we needed. And then we swapped chapters, and revised each other's, added, challenged each other. So
Oh, nice.
it was truly collaborative. And yeah, it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from working with him, and yeah, it was a really fun, really amazing process. I like co-writing a lot. I enjoy that. I learn a lot from working with co-authors, and
That's great. Well, it sounds like I didn't know you had that much of a connection with JP Moreland. So
yeah.
thanks for sharing that. That's really cool. It sounds like it was just almost an organic thing that sort of just came out of your relationship, as you mentioned, like you guys are like family.
Yeah,
That's
yeah,
neat.
yeah.
So I thought what we could do before we get going is go ahead and clarify a few key terms just to sort of orient ourselves and get a few key terms on the table. So let me, there's also a question from Kyle Rush now. He asked the following: can you explicate all the different models of substance dualism? He asked another question about Aquinian hylomorphic dualism. We'll sort of save that if that comes up later. But let me sort of focus his question a little bit even more. How does substance dualism contrast with property dualism and emergent dualism? And then also, how does it contrast with physicalism about consciousness in general, and then Christian physicalism in particular?
Okay. So that's all you want?
and you can be brief here, just
yeah.
because we're just sort of getting the things on the table. So
Right.
You don't have to go into all the details for sure.
I think the question, as I heard initially, was, can I explain all the different views of, kinds of substance dualism? And the answer is no. But we try to, in the final chapter, we try to chart the logical space. And I don't know how many we came up with, but I've got to say there's like maybe 15 at least different variations.
Oh, wow.
So, that's, and many of them I've not seen defended before. And we passed it around to a bunch of other people to see if they were aware of anybody who defended them. And so many of them seem novel, worth exploring, I think. So just briefly, I guess the substance dualist is committed to the way that we work it out in the book. We call it mere substance dualism. It is specifically a thesis about the human person. They're comprised of a soul, a fundamental immaterial spiritual substance, and a physical body. And the person is capable of existing without a body, but not without his or her soul. And the mental life of the person is possessed and unified by his or her soul. So that leaves, a huge room for varieties of different kinds of substance dualism. The physicalists, I guess, the easiest to contrast there, they are committed to a theory that is broader than human persons, although you could be a physicalist just about human persons. But physicalists are usually committed to the claim that a human person is nothing over and above the physical. You've got variations with Jaegwon Kim, for example, that have, they make space for maybe some immaterial property like consciousness, but it plays no causal role. So then in principle, physics will be able to explain not everything, but everything that is explainable. And so the person, could be identical to a body. They could be the functional system of a neural, some kind of neural system. But whatever they are, it's not going to include anything non-physical. Or if you adopt, what Kim calls physicalism or something near enough, then whatever is their non-physical property does no causal work. So then emergent dualism, two varieties: emergent property dualism and then emergent substance dualism. The emergent property dualist is, essentially physicalism. So whatever substances there are, it's going to be a purely physical one, and physical being worked out by, usually an atomic theory of matter. And then there might be properties, immaterial properties, that are not reducible to physical properties. And again, often those will just be epiphenomenal. They won't make a causal difference. The emergent substance dualist, that would be Hasker or Zimmerman, or even like most recently, Tim O'Connor's started defending a version of emergent substance dualism, changed his view there. So there you've got, this immaterial, you've got this physical substance, and usually it's very similar to what a physicalist thinks of that, but not always. It needn't think that. And that there is this new emergent immaterial substance that comes into existence. For Hasker says, once you've got the right physical structure in place, the soul comes into existence, and there'll be interaction between the two, and the person is comprised of body and emergent soul. And then the hylomorphist is, I asked John Haldane when I was at Baylor, and he was a professor there, what counts as a what do you need in order to be a hylomorphist? And he said, very, very what you'd expect from him. He says, well, you've got to hold on to the limit and the limited. And that, it's a way of saying like form and matter. You've got matter, this thing that is becomes what it is in virtue of having a form, the thing that limits it. What's unique about, I shouldn't say unique, what's different in the discussion is hylomorphism is usually not, and initially was not developed as a theory of a mind-body theory. It was initially developed as a natural philosophy, or an explanation of the unity of a biological organism. And so there you've got form and matter, very different view of matter than the dominant view today. The form is generally thought to be immaterial. It's what unifies the substance at a time. It's what grounds the substance's diachronic identity, or so at a time and over time. And then it's also responsible for the teleological development of the organism. So modern hylomorphism around those things.
Oh, I'm sorry. I'm thinking about the Aristotelian view. Is hylomorphism essentially come out of Aristotelian metaphysics, or it does sound like swirling in that what you described is sort of a telos, and the form sort of shapes and grounds the matter, and like you mentioned, at a time and across time, and with a direction towards some end. Right.
And so you've got this traditional Aristotelian view of substances there, that they have essences. They are they're particulars. They have a particular set of properties that are essential and accidental. And then again, like all the other views, there's variations of them, especially modern variations of them, where the form isn't taken to be a constituent of the substance. It's just a conceptual way of thinking about let's say the structure of a biological kind or something like that. So there's multiple ways of cashing all these out in the details.
Okay, and then for your view, I'm just curious, what sort of understanding of substance are you working with in your mere substance dualism?
So the mere substance dualism isn't committed to a theory of substance. So that's why we say that the human person is comprised of body and soul, and the comprising there, leaving space for whatever sort of theory that you want there. But the kind of view that we develop, we call it staunch hylomorphic substance dualism. It's not the best name. It's just the view is just weird, right? One, it's a long name, but two, it just brings in lots of debates. Moreland called the sort of ancestor of this view Thomistic substance dualism, and people, get, very protective of what Thomas thought, and probably rightly so. So I at
That's
least
right.
got to
That's
change
right.
that. But so the idea there is that we don't think that a person is an aggregate of parts. We don't think that they're just sort of made up of parts from the bottom up, like a physicalist ontology generally is. You can explain all the facts about something in terms of the facts about its parts. On the view that we developed, it's a kind of holism. So facts about the parts of the human person are grounded in facts about the human person in total, or the soul as a whole. And so the substance has inseparable parts, but does not have separable parts. This is, we're talking here about any subject of consciousness, actually. And so that has a strong hylomorphic kind of flavor there. We don't posit form or a specific kind of theory of matter that seems to be possible, but that's not something that that we press there. We think of it in terms of essences and powers. Some hylomorphists like Rob Koons think of form in terms of powers. So there's a lot of overlap there, but I would not at all want to claim that it's a standard kind of hylomorphism, but I certainly think that it's compatible with a kind of hylomorphism.
Okay, and it's staunch. I like that.
Yeah.
I like that. That's good. Okay, so we're going to jump into chapter 1. I posed to Dr. Rickabaugh what sort of chapters he would want to discuss, because it's a massive book. You definitely got to go get it and read it, because there's so much in it that we're not going to get to today. He picked chapters 1, 5, and 11. And so those chapters are, number 1 is Substance Dualism in the 21st Century. Chapter 5 is From Self-Awareness and Intentionality to the Self as Soul. And then chapter 11 is New Research Programs for 21st Century Substance Dualism. So that's fun. They sort of chart a potential path for future research in this area at the end. We're going to sort of briefly touch on chapter 1 and chapter 11, and then spend the bulk of our time in one of the arguments that they have developed in chapter 5. So let's go ahead and talk about chapter 1, and we'll do it sort of in broad strokes, and just sort of get the flavor for what's going on. And again, you'll want to read it to get all the details. There's a lot of great details in there. So in chapter 1, they talk about substance dualism sort of coming back. There was a revolt against it, and then there was this sort of turning around back to allowing as a logical possibility or a reasonable view substance dualism, which was often sort of castigated. And when I took Phil Mind, it wasn't even like a live possibility. It was like, oh yeah, there's dualists over here, but you get the Descartes thing, and then they're like, and hand wavy, don't worry about dualism. Yeah. Let's talk about physicalism. So anyway, that's why I love this, because it's come back around as a live possibility. And not only that, but the case against physicalism is actually looking more problematic. So I was just wondering, Dr. Rickabaugh, if you could sort of walk us through just some of chapter 1, sort of some of the main moves, and kind of give us a big picture of the context of why we should take substance dualism seriously now.
Yeah, thanks. So the first chapter kind of, has this sort of narrative, building at the beginning, which is to just, like you said, all the standard introductions, actually every introduction that I'm aware of in the analytic tradition, at least, starts with substance dualism as a foil. And it's often not treated very robustly. But I mean, to his credit, in the second edition of his Philosophy of Mind intro, Jaegwon Kim did expand and elaborate on and took substance dualism more seriously, at least insofar as he thought it worthy to go through more details. But really, in order to get, I think, the story of where philosophy of mind finds itself, you've got to go back further, even to even the sort of debates about idealism. And if you want to do justice to the neuroscience, which many physicalists or many philosophers of mind in general do, you've got to go back and start like around the 1830s or 1840s with the, sort of where the early cognitive or early neuroscience started. And if you do that, then you're going to find many of them starting with very dualist, substance dualists, assumptions and approaches, and idealism there too. And what I think you see in the development of philosophy of mind is a shift away from idealism and substance dualism to any sort of theory that is going to submit itself to the findings of the hard sciences. And at this time, you've got the logical positivists really playing the dominant role in adjudicating what counts as legitimate and illegitimate science. And so this is why you have physicalism start with behaviorism. What is consciousness? It is caught up in the sort of behaviors, of something that, as long as something acts as if it's conscious, then it counts as conscious. And so what's important about that, though, I think, is to note that the main reason of moving away from substance dualism was not any sort of discovery in the empirical sciences or any new philosophical arguments, but was one of sort of fad and in some ways like a sort of social or political tension to legitimize philosophy within the success of the sciences. That I think is important. And what happens in telling the story at the beginning is that we try to show through numerous quotes that rejections of substance dualism have not become more sophisticated, but have become more of just sort of, we go through all these really funny sort of quotes about how just dualism is ridiculous, but not substantive arguments. So what we wanted to do is start off by pointing that out, and then mentioning too that this transition that's happening, where it seems like many non-substance dualists are arguing, in fact, that the arguments for against substance dualism that are most popular don't turn out to be very significant arguments. And again, these are by philosophers that aren't defending substance dualism, and that's important to note. And then these shifts away from physicalism or standard physicalism towards other views like emergentism or panpsychism that often make use of the same sorts of intuitions that usually lead to the conclusion of substance dualism. And so we thought that that's important in terms of recognizing that the standard assumption outside of philosophy of mind, especially that physicalism is just well established and not challenged, just isn't true, and that things are starting to change. Now, this isn't to say that most philosophers of mind are not physicalists, but they're very prominent. In fact, one of the most prominent philosophers of mind, David Chalmers, says in several places that he splits his credence between substance dualism and panpsychism.
Oh, wow.
And that's just interesting because he's one of the most influential and prolific philosophers of mind. The narrative just needs to be changed about the state of it to actually reflect what's going on. And so, we try to work through that and set that up in the introduction. And we give, various reasons why, that is the case, primarily from the great difficulties of explaining consciousness within the confines of physicalism. And one of those being, the hard problem, trying to get facts about consciousness from facts about non-consciousness. Facts about consciousness from facts about purely physical states. And so the great difficulty of that in that project has led, a good number and very influential, very, very good philosophers of mind to now posit that consciousness is a fundamental feature of reality. And that is not standard physicalism. Standard physicalism is you're supposed to be able to get everything from physical facts. And now you've got physical things that are fundamental, but consciousness now is fundamental. And that means you're going to have a fundamental aspect of reality that's not going to be explained by physics. That's a significant shift. And the resources that, we go into, not just this sociological, the point that, look, people are changing their minds, but the reasons for why they're changing their minds. And then even further, that it seems like if you take those reasons seriously, you're going to have to start taking substance dualism seriously, because you lose the primary commitments that made dualism, severely unattractive. And then we just sort of, state the basic thesis that we're going to defend, in the book. That's essentially what we're doing in chapter 1. Substance dualism is a serious contender. Why? Because it's got strong arguments for it. Many of them have never been treated in the literature, which can be strengthened. There are some new arguments. The view survives the main objections. And then lastly, it provides a positive research project. So that's the overall theme of the book, and that's what we set up in the introduction.
Thank you for that helpful summary. Chapter 1. Now, there is one part I think it'd be good for people to have an understanding of regarding chapter 1, which is what you're defending, or what you're characterizing and calling mere substance dualism. So I went ahead and created a slide so you guys can actually see it. So if it's okay, Professor Moreland, I'd love for you to talk through some of the
Moreland
different...
is not here.
Let me start over.
When you're talking to a substance dualist, you've got to be careful, right? Because Moreland's soul just came into my body.
That's great. That's great. I think he's here in spirit or in soul.
I wouldn't put it past him. He's a fighter.
That's great. So I actually created a slide that has there's different theses, important theses that are part of mere substance dualism. So let me go ahead and put that on the screen now. And if you don't mind talking through those, Dr. Rickabaugh, that'd be helpful.
Sure. So I mentioned briefly, so mere substance dualism, it has to do with the human person. So we're not talking about, any other subjects. They're comprised of soul and a physical body. And the soul we take there to be a fundamental, immaterial substance. And we use comprise there, in the footnotes, we sort of explain this a little bit, because we're trying to represent a wide logical space. And substance dualists have not all held the same view of what a body is, and they've not all held the same view of the relationship between a body and a soul. And so comprised there, rather, instead of, composed of, for example, is intended to leave room there for substance dualists to develop more specified theories. The second commitment is that the human person is capable in principle of existing without a body, but not without his or her soul. Now, that's just a sort of in principle theory. It may be the case that based on some sort of contingent law, a soul couldn't exist without a body, right? You might have that view. That's some naturalists that are also substance dualists, which we talk about in the intro, would hold that kind of view. But on most substance dualist views, the soul can exist without the body. And then third, the mental life is possessed by the soul, by the person, and it is unified by his or her soul. So yeah, that would be that's what we want to say is mirror substance dualism. And that's a refinement of the statement that Dean Zimmerman has given before too. And it seems to track, well, and cover all the different varieties of substance dualism.
Great. And then I have right here sort of a encapsulation of it also, if people want to look at that. And I have a question about immaterial.
Mm-hmm.
So in one sense, that's sort of straightforward, not material. But then in another sense, because it's I guess it's a question I have, is it a property of a substance or is it a constituent? Is the substance sort of constituted by the immateriality?
Mm-hmm.
But what exactly, how do we latch on to intuitions about immateriality? I mean,
Yeah.
I can see like unity, I could see like simplicity of persons, but immateriality of a soul, I just don't know how you latch on to that, either through intuition or otherwise.
Right. Good. And it's worth noting too that's a sort of historical peculiarity, I think, that it's more difficult for us to think about the immaterial versus the material. That hasn't always been the case. And so one thing that you might think initially is just, well, let's try to run the same sort of thing with respect to the physical. How easy is it to capture the physical? And that might not strike some people as, at all a problem, but it actually is a huge problem in the philosophy of mind, called Hempel's dilemma. And that's just, what is physicalism? What's the view, right? What counts as physical? And that's a problem because our physics is incomplete. And so once physics is complete, we know that, one, because our physics is incomplete, that tells us that our theory of matter is false, and it will be revised along the way. So one thing to note is just, we don't want to stack the deck in favor of one view or another, assuming that it's really easy to pick out what it means for something to be physical. Two, then, is to just think of what it is that you're most directly aware of. I'm directly aware of my states of consciousness. I'm directly aware of being one thing. I'm directly aware of my will being the sort of thing that I'm directly in control of. And so you might think that now you're coming up with features that might characterize not immateriality full stop, but at least an immaterial human soul. That these are the sorts of features that pick out, what a immaterial substance is. And you could see that by juxtaposing it with the ways that contemporary metaphysicians or physicists talk about physical things. There's not really a deep unity to an aggregate of physical parts. There's a functional unity. So the kind of unity that I experience with respect to myself seems to be then something that is indicative of immateriality, or will, for example. Intentionality seems to be another feature that is the sort of thing that we're only aware of directly. I mean, when we're thinking about mental states. And yeah, so I would start there. Part of this might just come down to the debate about whether or not these features that I'm talking about can be reduced to physical features. If they can't be reduced to physical features, then they seem to be features of an immaterial soul. So
thank you. And then when you use the term soul, just to clarify, you're using that interchangeably with an immaterial, simple substance that unifies the person and is fundamental and is the part of them that can continue on without the body?
Right. Yeah.
I know there was a lot in there, but I'm just trying to, when
Yeah.
I hear the term soul a lot, and so I just want to clarify, because that might be in our viewers' minds as well. What is a soul?
Yeah. So this, I mean, one way to get at it, and this is where the phenomenological component of these arguments go, and the way that we develop them in the book is we start with our experience of things. So I seem to be a substance. I seem to be the sort of thing that has properties and isn't had or exemplified by anything else. And it's, that's that. And, in the local sense, I'm not the sort of thing, the existence of which is grounded in the existence of some other thing, right? I localize that so that we're not, if we speak globally, then you might think that no, we're radically contingently dependent on our existence, on God's existence. But locally, that would qualify something as a substance. And it is the thing that's immaterial. It's the subject of thought. It is the thinker. It can exist, right, in principle without its body. It is the thing, or its essence is what unifies the person, grounds its persistence, conditions. Yeah, all of those things.
And then to double back on something we mentioned earlier, a question that I don't know if we got to is Christian physicalism.
Oh,
so
right.
I've received some questions about that. And correct me if I'm wrong, my understanding, part of the motivation for becoming a Christian physicalist is perhaps because when Jesus returns, we will be resurrected or receive a resurrected body, whatever that is. And perhaps there's a sense in which our soul relies on a body. And so is that something that motivates Christian physicalism, or one aspect of it?
Good. I wouldn't say that is if you look at the literature, it does not seem apparent to me that is a motivation for the view. The motivation for the view usually just is, scientific or philosophical arguments for the neural, in particular, say Nancy Murphy's view, the dependence of consciousness on neural states, is something that really convinces her of physicalism. And she just she just states that, right? It needs to be the case that a Christian anthropology is something that is unlikely to be undermined by contemporary science, and she'll explain those sorts of things. Christian physicalists will, and there's a debate here, but there's also the Christian materialist, too, because physicalism has all these other theories that come along with it, like the causal closure of the universe. And it seems like, the incarnation is going to make problems for that, let's say. So the Christian materialist, the human person is wholly material, wholly physical. But not everything needs to be wholly physical or wholly material. God certainly could be, is not material. Angels need to be material. And so for the Christian physicalist or materialist, it's usually limited to the person, to be fair. And the argument about the resurrection is, I think downstream from these other arguments in the philosophy of mind. And often it's used not so much as an argument for Christian materialism or physicalism, but against substance dualism. And I've got a chapter in a book. I don't like the title because it's Christian Physicalism ? So is it Christian physicalism? Like, but that's the book. And I deal with, I think the chapter is like dismantling bodily resurrection arguments against the soul or something like that. And so I go through the arguments, Lynn Rudder Baker and Trenton Merricks and Nancy Murphy on that. And I just think a primary assumption is that if you're a substance dualist, then what you think a person, that the soul is what grounds the identity of the person, entails that the body is a bad thing, or that the body is not really significant to your flourishing, or that there really isn't any reason for a resurrected body. And that just seems obviously false to me and the history of substance dualists within the church. You might think, and it seems very plausible to me, that there are, and even Descartes thought this, that you needed to be embodied in order to have certain kinds of mental states. Without a body, you simply couldn't have those. The substance is a thing that has memories, let's say, but it needs to be united with the body in order to have particular kinds of memories or kinds of perceptions. And so long as those sorts of things are good for the, partly constituent of the human person's good, then embodiment is going to be a good. Swinburne has a paper where he develops this argument. Charles Taliaferro has got another paper where he develops this argument. But both of those papers I've never seen addressed in the literature, which is curious, because they're formidable papers. But that's just one instance you could think. And then to the negative, you might think too that all that the physicalist gets out of this argument is that what is most important about resurrection is just that I continue to exist. That doesn't do justice to the doctrine, though, because people can exist without having a resurrected and glorified body, especially if you aren't a universalist. There are going to be people that don't, let's just say let's say that you are an eternalist or a conditionalist, right? You can exist apart from God, and you not have a body at all, or you not have a glorified body. But you continue to exist, right? What is it that about having a body that is important for the physicalist? It seems like all they get is continued existence. But continued existence on its own is not what the doctrine of the resurrected body is about. It requires it, but that's not the main point of it. Right? And then alternatively, you could just look at what are the goods of bodily resurrection. And the dualist is going to argue those things they're either not bodily, as the physicalist wants to understand a body. They're not things that you can get from a mere aggregate of atomic simples, let's say, quarks, gluons, and whatnot. And that they are essentially embodied things, right? They are bodily soul features. That they are, a body is what it is in virtue of being ensouled. And so if you're going to have goods of embodiment or goods of resurrection, you're going to have an embodied soul. So those are, I give a lot more arguments in more detail in that chapter, but.
Okay. And I'll provide a link to it. What volume was that in?
So it's in a book called Christian Physicalism. The chapter is available on my website though, for free. So.
Okay. Yeah. BrandonRickabaugh.com.
Yeah. The book is like unjustly expensive. So.
So you can go get the
great papers in it, but
the preprint of the chapters or your chapter is available on your website.
Yeah.
Okay. Well, now I thought we would jump to chapter 5, and you talk about what's called the hard meta problem of consciousness. Now, probably our viewers are familiar with the hard problem of consciousness, but could you describe a little bit about the easy meta problem of consciousness and then the hard problem? Because this is going to become important as we progress through chapter 5. And then I can put on the screen the easy problem and the hard problem, what that's about, so they can read it as well.
Right. So the hard problem of consciousness just is about, maybe answering the sort of, why we're conscious. The easy problem might be, why, how are we conscious? But the other is why, in the sense of, one way to think about it, Chalmers does this, is just take the totality of physical facts about, the universe. So all the physical facts, every fact that physics will work with and explain ultimately. Total those up and then consider the qualitative facts, the facts about what it's like to experience a sunset or any state of phenomenal consciousness. And it seems to be the case that you can't derive facts about phenomenal consciousness from facts about physical things. And so that introduces what we call the epistemological problem of consciousness, and that turns into then what's called the explanatory gap, which is if you can't derive knowledge about consciousness from knowledge about physical things, then it seems like you can't explain consciousness in terms of physical things, and that would constitute the hard problem of consciousness. So you've got this easy problem and this hard problem. The easy problem might be the sort of thing, perhaps, that the neuroscientists can explain by figuring out the mechanisms for consciousness, let's say. But the why do you get experiences from the rearrangement of matter? That's going to be the hard problem, and it's called the hard problem because it's difficult, very, very difficult. And its difficulty, though, I'll say, comes from not consciousness itself. It comes from assuming physicalism, assuming that the totality of that everything that has causal power, everything that exists, with causal power, is going to be reducible to the physical, and that entails then that what consciousness either has no causal features, and that seems false, or is just reducible to the physical. And so the hard problem is hard because we're starting with physicalism.
Okay, and then just to clarify, so the meta problem you talk about there is just the hard problem. Is that right?
The meta problem then, hard and easy problem of consciousness is about consciousness itself. Mm-hmm. The meta problem, and this is coined by David Chalmers, is the problem of the difficulty in explaining why it is that the vast majority of people are inclined to think that consciousness isn't physical. Why are they inclined to think that or in the sort of, for philosophers, it would be, why are philosophers, even physicalists, inclined to report that the hard problem of consciousness is really hard? And it's hard in part because dualism just seems to be true. And so he calls this the meta problem of consciousness. And then we'll make this distinction, sort of playing on the hard and easy problem of consciousness, to say, no, that's an easier problem. The difficulty in explaining why we're disposed to report that is much easier than what we call the hard problem, or the hard meta problem of consciousness. And that's the difficulty of explaining why it seems to us that dualism and or substance dualism is true. So the easy problem is, well, why are we disposed to report that it seems true? And the other is, no, why does it actually seem true? The first one, I think, is easy because you might think that that's just a behavior that maybe is sort of culturally, ingrained or something. But the second one is, no, why does it seem, not why do they say it seems, but why does it actually seem the case to individuals that dualism is true?
And there you actually go through some of the data of dualist seemings, right?
Right.
Okay, so I thought we could jump into a little bit of that. So in 5.2.3, I love that it's actually all categorized that way. We get different dualist seemings that they go through. And correct me if I'm wrong, this is to answer that hard meta problem of why it actually is the case that it seems that we're composed of these, we're composed of a mind and a body that are two distinct substances. Is that correct? Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so the data here, the seemings are the data that need to be explained. And so we catalog 18 different distinct dualist seemings. And the point there is to just show that there's a lot of data that needs to be accounted for. And it is a problem. the difficulty of it being a problem, comes out in terms of juxtaposing physicalism with dualism with respect to these seemings. But yeah, the seemings we take to be the data.
Okay. And just briefly, there's distinctness. States of consciousness are not physical, although brain states are physical. Intentionality. My thoughts are, at least most of the time, about real things. Subject necessity, mindness. There's mental privacy, embodied privacy, neural contingency, zombie, which you guys probably know. It was Halloween yesterday. I saw some zombies, but not the philosophical zombies. Just the ones that are just, anyway, mental powers, essentialism, phenomenal unity. I'll let you guys sort of check those out in the book. As he mentioned, there's 18 different seemings that sort of are the data that need to be accounted for. Do you mind just talking us through a couple of those and kind of how they count as data and what they show?
Yeah, so they count as data because they are evidence. They're just a large part of philosophy is just trying to analyze what it is that we believe and why do we believe it. And so, why do we think God exists? We'll go through some arguments, let's say here. Why is it that it seems God exists? We'll go through, maybe the arguments in cognitive science here. This argument is similar to the sort of, cognitive science of religion kind of arguments. So if you study, and in a different section we do this, amass a huge amount. It's actually, I think, considered to be the most empirically supported belief in the cognitive science of religion that people intuitively believe or think that they're not identical to their body and can exist without their body.
Wow.
And in contemporaries, and these studies are reported across, the history of humanity and across socioeconomic divides and even religious beliefs, including professed atheistic communities.
Wow.
And
so it's a robust intuition.
Yes, right. And then what we do here then is, and there's studies that have to do with neuroscientists and studies that have to do, so there's, I can't remember how many studies there are, but I think we reference at least 30 of these studies, and go through a little bit about how they're put together. These 18 distinct dualist seemings are ways of capturing the variety of how those how people express the seemingness of dualism. And some of these are seemings that have to do just with property dualism. Others have to do with substance dualism. So this first distinctness has to do, this is part of what was behind the hard problem. It just states of consciousness they seem to not be physical, although brain states are physical and seem to be physical. So that's this distinctness with respect to the property of consciousness. There are others, another mental privacy. It seems like I've got a unique epistemic privacy with respect to my mind. Now, what we argue in another chapter is that epistemic privacy rides on metaphysical privacy. And so that chapter is the first detailed treatment of one of the main arguments against an argument for dualism from privacy. But here, it seems like people strongly seems to them that they know their thoughts in a way that no one else can know them. But it seems also that people can know things about physical things that are available to anyone at the same in the same way. There's no special way of knowing or standing with respect to physical things, but there are with respect to my mental states. And then there are more, then there are just strictly substance dualist intuitions. And one of them that we note here is the physical persistence intuition or seeming. And that's that it seems to the vast majority of people, they can continue to exist even though their physical parts can be replaced, or it's possible for them that they could have had totally different physical parts but still exist. And that one's beyond properties. Right now we're talking about the person and not a feature of consciousness. And so that's another way that or another kind of dualist intuition is at work here. And we quote Frank Jackson, who's anything but a substance dualist, a very staunch physicalist. He says, I take it that our folk conception of personal identity is Cartesian in character. In particular, we regard the question of whether I will be tortured tomorrow as separable from the question of whether someone with any amount of continuity, psychological, biological, neurophysiological, and so forth, will, with me today, will be tortured. And so physicalists themselves admit that they have a hard time rejecting dualism at the level of it just seeming to be true to them. And so we're asking, why is that the case, and what best explains those seemings? And that's the meta hard problem of consciousness.
Okay, and does your argument, a direct self-awareness argument, which is also in chapter 5, does that start to explain or justify those seemings?
Right. So here's there's the data, those 18 specific dualist seemings that specify all the different cognitive science studies that have been done on those. And we want to ask, well, what best accounts for that? And we want to say substance dualism is the best account of that range of data. So the thesis we develop here is, we call it the DSA, or direct self-awareness account. And here it's facts about dualist seemings are grounded in facts about being directly aware of oneself. And that being directly aware of oneself reveals oneself as being merely simple, immaterial substance, being something that's not identical or made up of any parts, physical or otherwise.
Okay, so the direct self-awareness account is how you explain the dualist seemings, that they're grounded in facts about a direct awareness of ourselves.
Right.
And then I'm sure you argue this later, but those seemings are very particular. They're of us as not being comprised of parts, as you mentioned, and then being immaterial. And that's why earlier I was kind of raising this question about the seeming of immateriality, or sort of what, I guess, what best explains it. And there you give, after accounting for or capturing DSA, you talk about diversity, ubiquity, and strength. And these are different facts about dualist seemings. And then if I understand, you want to argue that the DSA captures these facts, and that counts in favor of DSA being a good explanation, at least at this point, of handling the meta hard problem. Is that right?
Yeah, it's or more specifically, those three features. Those are three features of the seemings, and any explanation needs to account for all three of them.
Okay.
And so we're going to argue that the substance dualist view can account for all three of those, and the physicalist is going to have a very hard time accounting for all three of those.
Okay. And to get that going, you talk about knowledge by acquaintance. And this was a question I had. When I have done epistemology, typically knowledge by acquaintance isn't countenanced much. And so it's interesting that when it comes to philosophy of mind, specifically dualism, that's a central aspect of the view, that we can be directly acquainted with certain states of mind and things in them and just have knowledge in an immediate or direct way as a result of being in those mental states. So I'm curious how you use knowledge by acquaintance, and then also, can't I be acquainted with something but not directly aware of it?
Mm-hmm.
And additionally, can't I have for instance, like the speckled hen problem, where I'm directly acquainted with 48 speckles when I look at the hen, but I don't have any non-inferential justification for it unless I somehow counted them. But we're assuming we can get sort of direct acquaintance with things, and then it would be difficult to have them be non-inferentially justified. And given that knowledge requires justification, it doesn't seem like we get knowledge by acquaintance out of that. So if you could just sort of touch on, I know I asked a few questions, but take it anywhere you want.
Yeah, those are all really great questions. So one thing to note is that there is a resurgence of philosophers defending knowledge by acquaintance. And one interesting thing to note is that many of them are working in philosophy of mind, although there are some working in epistemology as well. And I think I think two things are going on there. One is that you will be directly faced with certain epistemic difficulties by doing philosophy of mind that you usually won't be faced with doing straight epistemology. And so the problems that are motivating some to defend or take on an acquaintance approach are not the sorts of things that people doing straight epistemology run into. And so that tells me that there is too much, partitioning off philosophical exploration into the different subdisciplines. And then that's a big point that we try to make throughout the book, is that once you get the ontological work in the ground floor, a lot of these issues in philosophy of mind, which approaches often do not take into account a robust ontological facts and theories. Once those do get placed on there, some of the issues become much more transparent. And I think that can be the case too with epistemology, and in this case, the knowledge by acquaintance. So, one thing to note: there are there's like a fly in here. Sorry. There are more and more people coming over to a knowledge by acquaintance view. And then secondly, I think that a motivation for knowledge by acquaintance, a motivation against knowledge by acquaintance is similar to the motivations for physicalism, and those often have to do with pre-theoretical commitments to naturalism. So in epistemology, the pre-theoretical commitments there are for versions of externalism. And this part of the historical story there again goes back to the logical positivists and the revolt against dualism. In particular, in order to count as a science, you had to get rid of things that could not be defined or measurable directly by behavior. And introspection is one of the things that you can't measure empirically. And so the move away from introspection towards and what ended up becoming a causal and externalist theory of mind were pre-theoretical commitments to naturalism. So one thing to note there is that it's not merely in virtue of the arguments in epistemology that do the work there, but things further upstream. And so in chapter 2 of the book, we analyze the role, right? Thomas Nagel, in I think Mind and Cosmos, he says, in philosophy of mind, we really need to pay more careful attention to these background commitments about naturalism and theism, for example. So we try to go into that in great detail in chapter 2. And I think Richard Fumerton, in his book, Knowledge, I think it's Knowledge, Thought, and the Case for Dualism, who's not a substance dualist, goes into this. He's an internalist, and so most internalists are acquaintance theorists, not all. But he does chart like this strong connection between acquaintance and a knowledge by acquaintance and dualism. And so there just seems to be this great tension between naturalism and physicalism and acquaintance theory. So I wouldn't be surprised that acquaintance isn't altogether popular in philosophy because of the popularity of naturalism. And so I'm not really fazed by that so much. So with the speckled hen, it can be the case that within my field of acquaintance, I do have this hen that has got, 43, I think it's 43 or 44, something like that.
48.
48. Oh man, now I can't handle
We'll just say 42, which is the meaning of life. Let's do that.
Okay. Oh, I can handle 42. 48 is
48. My field poops out after.
Right. There's varieties problem there. So right. So there's different ways that that you could go with this. You could just say that there is a distinction that you can make between the that something is presented to you, the fine grainedness of how something is presented to you, right? So why is it 48 speckled and not 2 billion particled, right? I think the reason is because like on any theory, like it's just not going to be the case that any sort of appearance, whether it be like a causal relationship that you hold, an externalist, epistemic relation you hold, is going to get you this justification about there being a billion particled, hen. What's supposed to ride the intuition there is that, well, yeah, it is kind of, if you look closer, it's 48 speckles, but from a distance, it's not clear to you. And so why think that the ontological relation of acquaintance that you have between mind and the hen is one that is fine-grained at a particular distance that gives you that sort of detail, right? So,
is that you just rejecting the description of what's going on there?
Right. Well, often it's not a detailed description. It's just, hey, if on acquaintance theory, if I'm looking at something, then I'm looking at all the details of that thing. And I don't.
And you're saying that's not the case. You're saying.
Yeah, I don't know why anyone would need to think that. And it becomes more apparent to me when I think of it as, instead of 48 speckles, like 100 million particles. Then the problem just loses its weight, I think. It seems easy for me to think that, I'm not acquainted with that feature of the hen. Right. So one thing would be to say that the acquaintance relation is with the hen at a particular level of detail, right? So it's not the case that I am acquainted with every fact about the hen that could be present in perception. Let's say when I get a little closer, when I use a microscope or something. It's just that the hen with a particular level of fine grainedness is something I'm acquainted with. I'm directly aware of it.
And does the intentionality come in here? So if I looked at a hen and I had the intention of being aware of the amount of speckles, would it then be the case that I could bring to my field the 48 speckles, even if I haven't counted them? Could I be directly aware, given that my intention is to sort of pay really close attention to the speckliness of the hen?
Right. Yeah, it seems like that's not going to be an option for most of us, but there's certainly people that are not neurotypical that have the ability to see that. Right? They can just look at, a group of things and just sort of see how many there are there. Right? But here's an important point to note is that neurodivergence is important here because it reveals to us that there's a phenomenal field that different people can have that reveal different facts about it. So it wouldn't seem right to say that, look, because I don't have synesthesia counts as an argument against acquaintance if sounds actually do have color features, and those features are apparent to those who have synesthesia. And so you could think that, no, it's just obvious that there's an awareness of the field, or that field is just not presented to me, um, the color of the sound or the speckles of the hen. So I think you go two ways. One, the acquaintance of the thing is going to be relative to the type of cognitive equipment someone has. That's any theory of epistemology is going to have to countenance that. But then two, there's also the degree, or maybe not the degree, but the level of awareness that someone has of their phenomenal field. But what really is at stake is whether or not I've got direct experience of what it is that I know.
And do you require awareness of the phenomenal field that's presented to you in order to have direct acquaintance with it?
Yeah. So awareness is tricky, right? That's like one of the problems in philosophy of mind, that it's very, very tricky to come up to specify what awareness is exactly. So I just want to say that whatever it is, I just want to say something like I'm acquainted. I at least have to have acquaintance with those facts that ground my justification for believing something about that experience. And if that's what awareness is, then okay, yeah, every one of those cases is going to have to include awareness, or attention rather. But if it's something less than that doesn't require epistemic, sort of explanatory facts between justification and what it is that I'm justified in believing about, then it doesn't seem to me that we would need attention there.
Okay, that's helpful. And then now you shift to monadic intentionality.
Right.
And you say, quote, "In our view, intentionality is a monadic property, a property instantiated by one individual, and thus not a polyadic or relational property that's exemplified by most, if not all, mental states, which consist of primitive consciousness of, ofness, aboutness, directedness toward an object or possible object for a subject. We therefore accept two largely uncontested features of intentionality." So here you're taking on board what you call primitive, and then mentality as well. And then also you assume an adverbial theory of awareness. So this kind of fills out a little bit more of your view of awareness. So could you talk about that? Why is the view of intentionality that you embrace monadic? And then the two features are primitive and mentality. And then what does it mean for a monadic property view of intentionality to adopt what's called the adverbial theory of awareness?
Right. Good. So the monadic property view is something we take from Brentano and Husserl, and that's so one thing to say is we're providing a model here. We're not saying that this is the dualist has to use this model to account for these seemings. We're just using a model that we also think is close to the truth. So that's important to be said. We're not saying that this is necessary for a dualist model to explain these dualist seemings, but it's a model that we think is accurate, and so we're inheriting this from Husserl and Brentano in particular. Part of that,
and then I can bring that up on the screen too, just
great.
If you want.
So the monadic part of it is there to help avoid cases where you're thinking about things that don't exist. So if you think that intentionality is a relation between the thinker and the thing being thought, then you're going to have in some strange way, Pegasus existing, right? if I think about Pegasus. And so, but Pegasus doesn't exist. And so that seems to be, be a difficulty. And one way of solving that difficulty is just think that intentionality is a monadic property, right? That it doesn't, that it's exemplified by the subject of consciousness, right? So it's instantiated by one individual. It's not polyadic or relational by standing as a relation between two things, each of which has that property, let's say. And that, again, that's to avoid that particular problem. It's primitive in the sense that it's not reducible to some fact that's not intentional. And that's part of the model, because we don't want to run into the problem of explaining intentionality in any reductive sense by having to take on explaining how it is that some neural state can be about something, right? It's going to be a primitive consciousness of or aboutness that an intentional state has. So it's not going to be reducible to a non-intentional state. And the mentality condition, it's going to be exemplified by a mental state. So we're just positing that. Here we don't think of it as a problem, because this is just a model to explain a particular set of data. Here we're not arguing for a dualist view of intentionality. We're just employing a dualist view of intentionality to explain a bit of data. In the same way, the physicalist is well within their rights to do the same, to posit a physicalist view of intentionality to explain the data. Right. So.
And then you.
Go ahead.
Oh, sorry. And then you go through several things in chapter 5 that we'll sort of skim over. You talk about givenness and directedness, direct self-awareness as a self-presenting property, self-awareness necessity, the causal acquaintance principle. So there's a lot more detail that you fill out, but I thought we could jump ahead to monadic intentionality, direct self-awareness, and dualist seemings. So this is 5.3.8, and I thought it kind of tied in with what we were talking about. So here let me go ahead and just put a quote on the screen, and then if you don't mind elaborating on it. Okay, so here it is. Applying monadic intentionality, which we just talked through, when one is aware of oneself, as opposed to a mental state one has, one simply directs one intentionality onto oneself such that the subject and the object of awareness stand in the identity relation to each other. In an act of self-directed intentionality, one is directly acquainted with oneself and certain self-presenting properties of oneself, including features revealed in acts of dualist seemings. In acts of self-directed intentionality, one has direct self-awareness, knowledge by acquaintance with oneself, that reveals oneself as an immaterial simple substance. So I thought this was important because it really ties together a lot of what you're doing in this chapter. Do you mind sort of talking us through a little bit of this and connect the dots, so to speak?
Right. So some of this rides on what we defend just before the section just before this, on what we call the causal acquaintance principle. And so that principle just says that necessarily, if some subject has knowledge by acquaintance with a causal fact, then that person has knowledge by acquaintance with the object that causal fact is grounded in, right? So the example that Tim O'Connor uses is if if you've got the subject, and you're directly aware of a causal fact, a hammer causing a nail to move, well, then that person is directly aware of they're acquainted with the hammer, right? So if in an act of intentionality directed at myself, call that, the sort of, causal fact, loosely speaking, then it's going to follow from the causal acquaintance principle that I am acquainted with the thing that's causing the intentional state. And then on the theory of the monadic theory of intentionality, that entails that it's me as the subject directing my, drawing my attention to myself, directing my intentionality onto myself.
Great. That's a cool sort of way of stacking things. I think you guys stack things in a way that's really rich. So to get the full details, I definitely recommend reading those sections. And you guys also go through, so this was just sort of the one argument you talked about, capturing the dualist seemings. And then you go on from 5.3. 5.4 is a direct reflective self-awareness argument.
Right.
And then 5.5, you deal with objections to self-awareness arguments. And you guys go through and knock down a great deal of objections. I think 7 major objections. And then with the dual process defeater, you talk about 4 other sort of subvariants on that. So really robust defense of this sort of self-awareness argument. And then I want to jump into another question from a friend on Facebook. Let's see. Perry Hendricks. He asks, in terms of arguing for dualism, what makes this book unique? So we sort of drilled into some of the details, which are fascinating. Mm-hmm. Now I think it'd be good to kind of zoom back out a little bit before we go into chapter 11. And he says, I get that it's comprehensive from the subtitle, but what makes their arguments unique? Mm-hmm. And I teed this up after going through one of your arguments, just so perhaps that's a unique argument. And perhaps some of the other arguments I mentioned are, and this is only in one chapter. So if you could just talk through, like, what makes your arguments for substance dualism unique, not just that it's a comprehensive book covering substance dualism.
Right. Yeah, that's good, especially since it's like, I think $43 or something. This chapter is really easy to point that out, just because no one else has made this kind of argument. So there just hasn't. So no one's made an argument for substance dualism from hard meta problem of consciousness. I mean, that's what makes it unique, is that it's just never been done before. Now, with respect to arguments from direct awareness of the self, those arguments have been done before, but no one has put together a robust theory of what it would mean, of a dualist model of how someone is aware of themselves. So usually on the arguments for dualism that have to do with self-awareness, it's just sort of assumed that you know what self-awareness is, and you can sort of come to that through teasing out certain thought experiments. And what that does then is it leaves the physicalist with some, I don't want to say easy, but easier ways of rejecting the view, just by offering a particular view of self-awareness that it is it's a fiction. For example, Dennett would say that you're aware of a self is a fiction, right? And if you don't have a theory about intentionality and self-awareness, then you're not going to have much of a response, except for saying, well, no, it does seem like to me like it's that myself is real. Usually the debate goes into then offering other arguments for the reality of the self, but we're putting together a very robust argument by attending to details about self-awareness and intentionality that no one else has done in this way. But then, and the other way too is that we just answer all of the prominent objections that have been raised against this view. Now that makes it exhaustive, but I mean, you can't. The question is kind of strange because what makes it unique? I get that it's exhaustive. Well, one of the things that makes it unique is that no other book has all of these arguments, or dealing with all these arguments in one place. But the responses that we offer, the objections, have not been in the literature before.
Oh, that's great. So there's a lot of novelness that's at the level not only of the arguments you put forward, but of your response to extant objections to substance dualism, which is really important. It's one thing to put forward a positive argument, and then it's another to not only put it forward in more detail like you do, but then also go into the literature and counter all the objections that are out there, which you've definitely done a lot of detail.
Yeah, and then I guess with awesome. The quote that you read from Rob Coons, I guess he sort of gives you two other features, right? And one of them is that we develop in great detail a Husserlian ontology and mereology, and then also develop, make uses of Aristotelian metaphysics, to make our case. And those two things have not been done, and certainly not into the detail that we've done them.
All right. That's another awesome aspect of your book that has never been done before. Yeah, so let's transition now to chapter 11. And this is fun. So I thought I'd put on a hat. I don't know. I could put on a thinking cap from Stranger Things. Could do a Stranger Things thinking cap. I could go full King. What do you think? What should I put on just for the last chapter? Bring it home?
I mean, the King makes me think of Gordon Ryan, if you follow jiu-jitsu. I don't have a preference either way, I guess.
Okay. All right. Well, I'll go ahead and go with the King. I think my kids would like this one anyway. This is what I wore last night when I took them trick-or-treating. There we go. Okay. So we'll just do that just for fun. So I love chapter 11. I mean, you guys basically chart, you sort of lay out, hey, if you're taking this seriously, here are some options for future research programs. And this shows sort of the power of substance dualism again, because it offers all these fruitful research paths and programs that haven't really been developed, at least not robustly. So could you talk us through a few of the different avenues of research that you sort of identify and sort of the map out as possible future areas to think about with substance dualism?
Yeah, so we break it down into 4 different broad projects. So conceptual, methodological, developmental, and then applied. And the conceptual is just sort of drawing attention to the fact that substance dualism is not identical to Cartesian dualism. And others have made this point. Zimmerman makes a good point of just saying, look, there are going to be, I think 4 Cartesian commitments if you're going to hold to a Cartesian view. And I believe he argues that almost no substance dualist today defends all of those commitments. So we go into more detail in pointing that out. So in the historical section, we just show, like, look, all these different people that have historically defended substance dualism disagree with each other on pretty important issues, embodiment for one. And what that does is it shows us that the logical space is much bigger, wider, more vast than people recognize. And then 2, the sorts of responses that one often gives to substance dualism assumes a very, very small area of the logical space. One of the other points that we make is that, look, if you consider the arguments for substance dualism, most of the prominent arguments don't entail any view of the body, really. any specific metaphysics of the body. And so we go through a variety of views of what a substance is. And you could either think that the substance dualist can hold any one of those views with respect to the body or with respect to the soul, or a hybrid view where you've got a body counts as a substance according to Y conditions, but the soul counts as a substance according to X conditions. And that provides all kinds of varieties of substance dualism. And then we just go through like what are the existing varieties of substance dualism and show that contemporary substance dualists have varying views on these things that are really important to attend to and have serious consequences. So there's this logical space of views that can be developed. Alex Pruss and I have a paper where we develop what we call I can't remember what we're calling it now. Gaze dualism, right? And it's a particular way of solving the causal closure, problem. It's a weird view that's possible, that's uncharted, that ends up doing a lot of interesting work.
Is that G-A-Z-E?
Yeah, gaze. Yeah. It's
okay.
Yeah. So we want to say, like, look, you can have like all the sorts of things of causal closure, all those sorts of principles, but it doesn't entail epiphenomenalism. And a part of the way we work out is this gaze theory of mental causation, or ontology of mental causation. Hopefully that gets published somewhere.
Okay. Oh, this is still a work in progress.
Well, we just submitted it recently.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I was going to tell people that I'll provide a link to it, but yeah, we'll keep an eye out for it.
Yeah, hopefully one day there will be a link. Sorry. My office is, the window is right next to a busy street here, so.
Oh, no worries. I figured, this is getting so, you guys have charted so much territory, you're going to get arrested or something. You've charted so much new territory. It doesn't seem legal to do this with substance dualism.
We were worried that a publisher wouldn't publish it because it's so long. And academic publishers are not prone to publishing books that long, so we were very fortunate with Wiley Blackwell.
Yeah, that's great. It's just like in the music industry, some of the best work are these long pieces that really explore the space, which you've done, instead of just the pop hook, 3 to 4 minute song that everything's buttoned up, and
people don't create.
So you guys are more like you guys are more like the extended LP. Yeah.
Hopefully that's a good thing.
I think so. I mean, it's robust. This would be one that you might want to bring to a deserted island.
I mean, as I was preparing for this, I think I mentioned it's been a year since we really worked on it, and I'm writing 2 other books now. And so I forgot that we had said some things. And I'll say the other thing we try to do is just a huge amount of research, in large part to show like there's a vast literature of contemporary substance dualism, works by contemporary substance dualists that just has not been addressed. It's just people are just not aware of all the different replies to the pairing argument, causal closure, all these different objections and views. So we try to do that as well, which made it, much, much bigger.
And then one other thing I thought we could mention, which I know you do research and teaching on philosophy of technology and AI. And actually, philosophy of technology was my first love in philosophy, believe it or not.
Cool.
In my undergrad, I went to Cal Poly San Luis, and I worked with a guy there who was really open to philosophy of technology and loved it. So I did my thesis on it. And I love philosophy of technology. And now with AI exploding, I mean, the urgency to explore philosophy of technology grows even more. So in chapter 11, I believe you also mentioned something about AI. So could you briefly touch on that and what that future research project with substance dualism and AI might look like?
Yeah. So one question, you could ask a whole bunch of different questions with AI, and one question that people are asking is just, is AI or could AI become conscious? And you might just think like, well, if one of these are, if you partition the logical space like we do between what we call subject complexity and subject simplicity, subject simplicity is the theory or the thesis that a subject of consciousness has no separable parts. Subject complexity being the subject does have, at least one separable part. If subject simplicity is true, then an AI can't be conscious, right? It's going to be an aggregate of either parts or an aggregated algorithm, or there's a couple that there's a variety of answers to that. Interestingly enough, in the AI world, the subject of thinking is not really talked about when they define AI. It's in terms of a research project, which is interesting. I guess that's a point, a side point. But you might think that arguments for substance dualism have implications for AI in terms of whether or not an AI could, in principle, become conscious. But then you've got other issues, though, too, about whether or not a soul could be embodied in an AI, and there it wouldn't be the case that the AI itself is conscious in terms of, like, say it's the neural network. Let's say that the AI is identical to the neural network, and it wouldn't be that the neural network ends up becoming conscious, but the soul that is, let's say, causally linked to the AI is the thing that's conscious. So an artificial thinker wouldn't end up being the neural network itself, but would be the soul, of the neural network. Another thing to think about would be, sort of issues in mind uploading, or what I think Anders Sandberg calls whole brain emulation. And so Nick Bostrom, they make this distinction between mind emulation and person emulation. On mind emulation, you've got a brain emulator that is detailed and correct enough to produce the phenomenological effects of a mind artificially. A person emulation, though, that's a mind emulation that emulates a particular mind. And so if what we argue is correct, and non-substance dualists defend this theory too, and that's that you can't have thoughts without thinkers, or consciousness without a subject of consciousness, then in order for me to be uploaded, it's going to have to be at the level of person emulation. And so what the substance dualists can do is come in and argue that, look, mind emulation has all of these particular problems. And so if we're going to work on this project of mind uploading or whole brain emulation, it has to be at the level of the subject, right? And so what the substance dualists can do there is focus in on the more plausible or the only possible research field there, which is at the level of person emulation, and not merely mind or phenomenological emulation. And so then that would play into issues about transhumanist projects. If a person can't have separable parts, and a brain implant is a separable part, then it turns out that we can't ever become cyborgs in the sense that we're identical to some soul biology machine hybrid. It would just be that they end up becoming things that we're connected with in particular ways, and that will change the ethical situation there. It'll change the ethical situation there.
So
it would also change, I guess I would say too, like Neuralink, say, the way that people talk about, the way that Musk talks about Neuralink. It's going to be the case that thoughts themselves are not shareable on this view, or on what would be most friendly to substance dualism. It's going to be the case that there will just be a more intimate level of connectivity between the communication of two individuals that'll bypass things that are outside of your neural resources, and it'll just be neural state to neural state. Right? That's going to be, you know, a really important feature of testing whether or not Neuralink actually is linking subjects together. Because if you assume that what you've got to have is mind sharing, that you can have my thoughts, well, then the experiments are going to come out unachieved. The results will come out unachieved. But if what you think just is only possible to happen is that we share a more intimate neural connection, then and that's what you're testing for, then the success of that tech could be, you know, you'll know when it's achieved. So it would be another case of where, you know, substance dualism would inform a particular research project there with technology.
And what would be the testing for whether there's a subject present?
Yeah. So like if we're going to test whether or not you and I can be linked up to each other, it's so one thing you'd want to do is you'd want to rule out. It'd have to be the case that you're not detecting the intermediary links that we have, say, with a verbal communication. It's got to be the case that there are all these above neural or things that stand causally between our neural states that account for the communication. So we want it to have to be, well, those things are absent. And again, this is just probabilistic, but it would just be that all the tests that we've got that show that those things are present, well, they're absent in the tests. And then we have this, can we communicate to each other highly specified, you know, thoughts? And if we can, in the absence of the features that are common to extra or above the neural activity, then we've got some sort of neural to neural direct communication there. That would just be to say, like, you know, we've bypassed the sort of, you know, sound wave and visual sorts of ways of communicating that are, say, in between you and I and our neural states. It would be something like that, I guess.
Wow.
And then whether or not there's a subject would just be in, can you report what I was thinking and that message, and can I report the message that you were thinking? That's
right.
There were subjects. Yeah.
Wow, that's fascinating. So that, and I remember when I was first starting out looking into the AI literature, there was this distinction about whether AI could become conscious, and then it was like too hard of a problem, or whether machines could become conscious, and then it was like too hard. I think, was it the hard problem of, there was some distinction there. Yeah. And then basically for a long time, technologists, roboticists, and AI workers just set that aside and said, well, like, can we do stuff with neural networks? Can we like create these machines that sort of like, you know, you have the robot Olympics or whatever, the soccer games, and, you know, can they like do stuff, the self-driving cars and so on. But now it seems like it's come back around where that's a really live question, whereas for a long time it was sort of put to the side. It was just too crazy, too hard. So how would your view, we can end on this, how would your view of substance dualism account for AI becoming conscious? Would the AI the neural network, or would it just simply need to be directly aware of itself as a simple immaterial substance? So like, does it just require that intentionality directed at itself as the subject, and then it's seeing itself or having knowledge by acquaintance of itself as the certain properties that a substance that's not identical to the body would have?
Right. So that would be whether or not the AI could know whether or not it's a thinking subject. The problem is that these, so take the the Turing test, or take the way that people are describing or testing whether or not large language models are conscious, are based on a behaviorist view of consciousness. So on the Turing test, you've got, if you can fool a person to think that what they're interacting with is a human, then that machine that's done the fooling is going to, we're going to count that as being conscious. And now with the large language models, it's a level of unpredictability in what the models or what the neural networks are generating. We didn't expect them to generate this kind of output, and that the output seems to be getting closer and closer to the kind of output that we can get from information that we gather. That's to say that the test there is just, well, if it behaves like we behave, or something close to we behave, then it counts as conscious. That's based on a behavioristic theory of consciousness there. And so what the substance dualist would just, would say, or anyone who rejects behaviorism really, anyone who rejects it, the dualist is going to say that physicalism in many ways is going to reduce to a form of behaviorism. Functionalism just seems to, certainly in testability, reduced, the testability for the presence of consciousness is going to reduce to a kind of behaviorism. But what the substance dualist would say, that that's just not adequate. It's not adequate. And there would be, the implications of that would be, one, the ability for us to know whether or not an AI is conscious is far more difficult than we think right now. And that ought to give us pause in terms of how we are developing and to what degree we're developing these technologies. Because if it is conscious and we can't detect it, then we're going to have a much higher likelihood of harming, an AI person, if there could be such a thing, because it'll be conscious and we just couldn't know, or don't know, or unlikely to know. Or we're developing things that we think are conscious but really aren't, and then giving them certain rights and responsibilities that only should be had by conscious things. And that's a problem. So one thing is a substance dualist could, in virtue of raising the bar of how we would measure consciousness, would have great implications for how it is that we go about, and to the degree, that we go about developing certain technologies. It would also have so part of this is what's called the alignment problem, how it is that we can get AIs to think like us in various ways, especially ethical ways. And that seems to be dangerous, in part because we don't know what's going on inside of large language models. So our programming, it's not transparent to us how our programming will be linked up with or lined up with our ways of thinking. But if our ways of thinking are not discernible merely by the output, then you would have reason to think that the alignment problem is worse than we think it is. And so there's greater caution that we should have in producing these sorts of technologies. And then I'll say, lastly too, the unity of consciousness problem, and this is in the new book I'm writing, there'll be a whole chapter on this, is if the unity of consciousness is a phenomenal consciousness is a requirement for the possibility of a subject of consciousness, then we have an in principle reason to think that there just can't be any subject of consciousness that has separable parts. And as far as we can discern, any sort of future AI in principle is going to have separable parts. If it doesn't, then it'll be a candidate for being a soul. But that's to say that, an AI having consciousness is just not possible. Right? Which also would
is there a worry that sets the bar too high and we miss the fact that it has become conscious? which you mentioned?
Yeah, that's a problem because, well, one, we just need to know where the bar is.
Mm-hmm.
Right? And so if the bar is high, then the bar is high, and we need to acknowledge that. Because like you said, if the bar is high, and we don't understand yet how to discern the bar with an AI, then we could develop, because let's say that it's the outputs that it has or the level of thinking that it has that might be indicative of something that's conscious, let's just say the evidence for it is not transparent to us, then we can develop something that's conscious without knowing it, and think that it's not because its behaviors aren't there. That is to say that it seems pretty obvious that things can behave as if they're not conscious but be conscious. And if you're measuring it at the level of behavior or a particular kind of output, but consciousness is far more than that, or the epistemic features of consciousness are far more than that, then it seems like you're creating things that, if they're conscious, are fit for certain rights, and that'll be missed out, and you'll just end up killing tons of artificial subjects or people, if there could be such a thing, right?
Right. Wow. That's both scary and like a power of your research program. And you've mentioned the book you're writing several times. I mentioned at the start the What is Consciousness book. There's another book though, right? What is that one?
Yeah. So this one is the Conscious Mind Unified. That was the title of my dissertation. This isn't exactly my dissertation, but it works out in greater detail and in different areas. The basic idea is the book will be the only exhaustive development of the unity of consciousness argument against physicalism.
Okay.
That's basically what it is. The subject of consciousness has to be unified with respect to, Husserlian inseparable parts.
And this will be out in 2024, or it's still?
My goal is to finish it by November or December 2024. So.
Oh, okay. So look for it in 2025. But it looks like your textbook, or What is Consciousness, is coming out in 24.
That's the hope. It's up to the publisher once you get that in. But yeah, that's
okay. Well, keep an eye out for those, and you can follow Dr. Rickabaugh at, as it says on the screen, BrandonRickabaugh.com. So you can stay up to date with all of his publications there. You got a great website, by the way. It's really nice. Well done. So yeah, definitely go check that out and get the book. Definitely recommend getting the book. And with J.P. Moreland that they produced, it's an amazing intellectual achievement. And so I thought I'd end on a blurb by Charles Taliaferro, and he writes this excellent little summary of their book, and I think it nicely encapsulates another reason why you should go get it. He says, quote, "Rickabaugh and Moreland have produced a tour de force." Completely agree with that. It's a tour de force in this brilliant systematic case for substance dualism. It is a treasure trove of arguments, objections, and replies that should be required reading in philosophy of mind today, challenging the current ingrained prejudice against dualism. So I definitely recommend getting it. Right now, the paperback on Amazon's only $39.95, which for a book this size and with so much great, as he said, treasure trove of arguments, I definitely think it's worth it. And it's going to hopefully chart the path for future research in substance dualism. And definitely if you're a young philosopher, if you're a young Christian philosopher, you can go to this as a resource too for picking out different ways in the logical space that you can start charting. So I'm sure Dr. Rickabaugh and Moreland hope that that's a future sort of legacy of this book, that it spurred future research programs, or at least charted a path for future ways of developing substance dualism and its implications.
Mm-hmm.
So thank you so much for coming on Coffee with Philosophers. I hope you guys have had a good time. And any last thing you want to share or say?
No, this was really fun. I appreciate that you took the time into reading it and put together really thoughtful questions. And thanks for having me on. That was a lot of fun.
You're welcome. Yeah, thank you again for coming on, and keep thinking critically about life's big questions and keep exploring the philosophical foundations of Christian theism. We'll see you next time on Christian Philosophy Academy.